So the prototype community of the future, which I call Microtopia, has a basic concept that which each of us as a citizen essentially invests in a company, if you will, similar to the way the original colonies were founded by the Plymouth Bay Company. And each of the colonists has a certain amount of shares in sweat equity, and then they're the capitalists. So I believe that each person would have a capital share, which could be pledged as sweat equity, and each person would have a sweat equity share and perhaps a citizen share, if you will. And what we provide is health, education, food, clothing, and shelter. And I believe that can be done with 25% of the workforce. And the rest of the workforce time, you don't have to work, fundamentally it means that people are given absolute freedom from economic insecurity or anxiety with a 25% time commitment. And it's community based. So what that means is that over time, each community would get more and more distinctively regional instead of more and more McDonald's same-like. And the reason is this concept of having a stake in each community. And this is what I call jokingly neo-feudalism. So when I was a kid, I lived in a university town, and I disliked it because everybody seemed cloistered, and they didn't seem to make anything. They were just mooching off the rest of the world's production. But as I went out to the rest of the world and wanted to make real things of real value, I became very appreciative of what UC Davis was. And I believe really that the UC is an ideal model for the nucleus of each community, is one or two major universities. So a community might be defined at this level as being perhaps 1 million people. 10 communities of 100,000 that collectively might have 2 major universities. And that these universities act as the educational and medical systems. And it also should be where people put their energy. So the 75% of the people's production capability that isn't being tied up, because we shouldn't have much crime because there's no economic anxiety, there's complete medical care, etc. And I can give you good reasons why there won't be much crime, and also the reduction in the mobility of people shifting in and out of communities, which is obviously tricky because it sounds like a reduction in freedom. But what it is it's a greater investment. You have a county government now, you have a city government now, you're not involved with them, and the relation is essentially adversarial. So if you can create some, I believe that as people can gravitate towards like-minded communities, which could be very diverse, it could be themed along different lines, like you might have, I think a university town is a good example, or towns based on traditional industries. And I believe that each of these research centers will develop its own interests, and that this community corporation can then be a funder of community-based business activities above and beyond the basic infrastructure, connected as a VC system for the community. And the key thing, though, is that if you create a stock structure like this for the community that's based on, well, this is a tricky thing, is how do you tie this in to the concept that if you put it on a desert island, let's say there's 100 acres on this desert island, and there are 5 families. Do you want the neighbor next door to have 40 kids in 20 years? Let's say they hyperbred. Now suddenly you have this island, you have 40 people on one part of it. And let's say the island doesn't have enough food for everybody. So what's happening now, who's losing right now in the food fight is nature. And that means, and I believe that all the things that are becoming more and more unpleasant in America are due to overpopulation starting to set in, not in terms of per square mile, but in terms of pressure and structure on the system. For example, where I live, I had a car with tail lights out. I would just pull out of my driveway and drive down the street, and bam, I'd be hit by a cop. Bang, bang, bang. 3 times I went out, 3 times I got hit. This I'm paying for. I'm paying for this. Why shouldn't this guy have actually a little shop in his police car where he puts the lights on the people's cars instead of creating this big feedback loop? I know it sounds bizarre, but we don't have to be adversarial against ourselves.